But cost savings isn't the primary reason for doing it. It's getting rid of the negative competition between neighbors that takes us all down, but rather positive cooperation to take us all up. Though building code enforcement is one place where we might save a little and share a little more. So let's ask the question about why are there so few cost savings? The governor assumes that shared services equates to cost savings, and it sort of seems like it should. So why is it that we're not finding so many? So the first reason is this basic economic concept of economies of scale. And it turns out that economies of scale for local governments are limited. Mark Holzer, who's the dean at Rutgers, has written a book, and he says for most services at about 25,000 population, you've hit your economy of scale. And then you might actually start getting increased cost of service delivery due to the higher degree of urbanization, which requires a higher level of service. So where the savings might be most possible would be for the smaller towns, villages, maybe some of the smaller cities. Again, where that economy of scale could continue to give you a lower cost would be in your back office services. Think of Golisano, who made his money with Paychex. What is Paychex? It's a back office payroll operating system, right? And so you can become an expert in payroll operating systems and do many companies, right? And keep bringing those costs down. So this is where I think if we had some statewide leadership on, well, purchasing contracts, which y'all know more about than I, or the upfront capital cost for information technology, there might be some savings that we could get, because I think that cost curve has the potential to go out to a greater degree. And there was a question, hand raised. Yeah.
Theory on why the economies of scale are limited at 25,000?
Well, that's not a theory. That's based on the empirical research. And again, most of the empirical research is on trash collection. And why trash collection? And the trash collection studies find it about 25,000, okay? And people extrapolate from trash collection because it's the only place where there's good academic data. And when I'm in Europe, they're all talking about garbage, and I'm like, why are you talking about garbage? It's just not that important a local government service. And then they say, it is. It's our biggest expense, because we're not responsible for all the health and education services. We're not responsible for police. We're not responsible for fire. We're not even responsible for in some cases, not even their roads. In Australia, it's roads, rates, and rubbish. That's local government is roads, rates, and rubbish. Roads, garbage collection, and rates, their word for taxes. That's what they are. In Spain, garbage is their #1 expense. So they all study garbage. It's not our is it the #1 expense for any of you guys? I mean, my goodness, we have much more, because we're so autonomous and we have so many responsibilities. We're interested in a much broader array of services than just garbage collection. So let's just do a basic little economics. I hate economics because it's always hard to understand curves, but I want to put something here on the curve for you all to think about. So as you go from one municipality to a couple, if you can bring your costs down, that's when you're getting an economy of scale. Okay? But how far down is it going to go before it can actually start going back up? Think of garbage collection. In Barcelona, Spain, they collect garbage every day. It's hot, they have lots of tourists, their roads are narrow, and the stuff stinks. How many of you have daily garbage collection? Where are you from? Okay. But everybody else, twice a week, once a week? Weekly, okay? So when you have daily garbage collection because your congestion and the heat is such, and your tourism market or whatever, it requires you to go there, that's going to make your costs go up, right? Go up times 5, times 7 if you do it every day. So that's what you need to think about, is urbanization can actually make your cost rise. But let's assume we've got a cost curve that does go down and sort of sit there. Then I want to add in the management cost of designing the shared services agreement. Are these things hard to design? Do they take time? That time cost. It's what we call in economics, we call a transaction cost. It's the management cost. Then I want to talk about the little red line called leveling up. When you have different union agreements, when you have different service standards, and you come together to share, are you going to share at the lowest common denominator wage agreement? Lowest common denominator service? Or are you going to share at the highest one? Do you have legal constraints determining whether you get to level up or level down? Y'all know this more than I do, but I think the legal constraints say you're going to level up. So if you add in the management cost and the leveling up cost, shared services could end up with more expensive local government, not cheaper. In Australia, 10 years ago, in the state of Victoria, where Melbourne is, and in the state of New South Wales, where Sydney is, those states decided to consolidate their local governments. And overnight, they did. You get up tomorrow, you don't go to work because your government doesn't exist anymore, we've created a new one. What they got was a more effective government for the 21st century. Professional folks. Now every manager has a master's degree in management. The rural governments are along watersheds. The city governments actually correspond a little more to the shape of the city, though even then, they left Melbourne with 5 local governments. So it went from like 30, but it went to 5 instead of 1. What was the politics behind that choice? I don't know. But in any case, 10 years on, no cost savings. There's lots of research on it, no cost savings. But the local government sector is actually not so unhappy with the consolidation because they have more effective local government. They feel like they are positioned. You know, in the world now, it's not states that matter. It's cities, and it's city regions. And city regions are what compete in the global economy. And they think that they have set up their city regions to be global competitors. And their rural regions, more and more and more with climate change, we have got to pay attention to natural resource management. And you need high quality, very technical natural resource management. And tiny, tiny, tiny little units of rural government can't afford to pay for that. But if you bring them together in some kind of a collective, maybe you can. And so that's where they're headed. Now they did it through duress. For whatever reason, the states have enough power in that country to change the face of local government overnight. And they did it, but they didn't save money. So I've talked about management costs, the cost of designing the agreement, and here's, yes?
Did they believe that they didn't save over what it would have been? I.e., they didn't save money, things trying to level that. But the people believed then at that time that they saved much more than it would have been had that not been done. I mean, so no one's rioting, no one's upset. There has to be a rationale for that they would understand that the costs increased.
You know, I haven't spent enough time to give you a good nuanced answer, but the scholarship sits in 2 worlds. The anti-consolidationists who say this shouldn't have been done because it didn't save any money, and you obliterated all these little local governments that people had identity with. And then you have the pro-consolidationists that said, well, it didn't save money, but it's more effective and we're positioned for the 21st century. So that's where the 2 worlds sit. What they did, in addition to the consolidation, is they created something called Regional Organization Councils, ROCs, because they recognized that they would still need sharing, no matter what geographic dimension you give to local government. There's always going to be a neighbor, and there's always going to be some service that you need to coordinate with that neighbor, by definition. I mean, just, you know, if you think of a watershed versus a transportation shed versus a garbage pickup district, I mean, they have smaller geographics, but at some point you're always going to have a neighbor that you need to work with. And so they created an administrative structure staffed with planners and and public administration and finance people to help work through all of the design costs of the possibilities of sharing, and then try to convince the local governments to share by showing them the data. Now, in New York State, we've had that with BOCES for school districts for a long time. They bear the burden of the administrative design cost, and they try to convince their partner school districts to come in and share an IT agreement, for example, or to share a grade report processing. If the state is really serious about encouraging more sharing with local governments, why don't we create a BOCES type structure for local government to do that kind of sharing? That's what Australia did with its regional organization councils, its ROCs. That's what British Columbia did in Canada when they really wanted to see this happen. This stuff is not free. The management costs are significant, and you need some structure. Now, maybe counties could step up and play that piece, but who's going to pay for it? It's not free. And the other thing that I find interesting about the BOCES model is not only is there technical staff there to think about what this looks like and state aid to pay for it, there's also a governance structure that says if you come in, you pay your share of management cost, of the administrative cost, and then you opt in and out on the marginal cost of any particular sharing arrangement that you want to play with. You play this year, you don't play next year, fine, but you're still holding the bag for your share of the admin cost. That's important because, like I'm telling you, these shared services arrangements are fragile, and your neighbor who sees it in their self-interest to exit this agreement that you've just spent years designing, and you've worked it out with admin, the overhead cost, and the marginal cost figured out, and then you have a partner leave, the other partners are left holding the bag on that partner's share of the admin costs, because those don't go away. In the BOCES system, as I understand it, the partner that leaves still pays their share of the admin costs. So we can critique BOCES for lots of things, but what it was designed to do was to encourage sharing, and it acknowledged that sharing's not free, and that the potential to free ride, I'm talking about cooperation here, but we're also all a little competitive, and we're all a little self-interested. The potential to exit the system when it's in your benefit and leave your neighbor holding the bag, that's a real budget-driven temptation. And so we need a structure to think about it. So if we're really serious in this state about doing it, we need to think about, we have some hard work to do at the state level designing what these structures would be. Do you want to join BOCES and do a COSER? Because that's possible. And for a lot of your back office services where I see the most potential for savings, BOCES could do those for you. If you're small rural towns and villages, that might be a different option than going with the county. You should think about it. We also need to think about restrictions on service sharing. At the town meeting, y'all told me that you're not allowed at the town level to cooperate with your fire districts.